Well, hey team, Grant Hagan here with Reality Capture Live. Thanks for tuning in with us here for another great episode. It's great to see you guys again. If you joined in with us last time, I had a different host in here with us in Jay, who just had an awesome conversation with you guys here a little bit ago. It's great to be back. My wife and I added a little one to our family here, and so I had some time to spend off with them, which was great. I appreciate some of you guys reaching out and sharing some congrats, so appreciate that. But it's great to be back. One, I just love this season of the year. It's kind of in reflection mode. Everyone's kind of planning for the next year. And really what I am excited about in this episode that we have a really fun conversation slated here today is a little bit different perspective than I think what we traditionally get to have in some of these conversations about reality capture with really the owner side of things. This was really an interesting topic that we were kind of noodling around and considering, and it was really one that that's how I first got into reality capture, was really an encouragement from an owner of a project that we were working on, just trying to kind of do some fun and creative things on the project that I was working on. So we have a really fun and exciting conversation slated in here today. And I just want to get right into it. We have Danny and Raymond, both with PMA, that have some really unique backgrounds in this idea and space of reality capture from this perspective of an owner. And I love the little tagline here of why contractors should care about this too. But really what we wanted to kind of dive into today was really hearing from them, asking them kind of some good questions about what it's like from their perspective. They both have two kind of unique roles within PMA that I think are really just going to be a great time for us to dive into this conversation and really get some really interesting insight from someone that we may not get to interact with much from the perspectives that we get to share. And so one, just want to encourage you guys, join this conversation, right? So we are live. This is truly live. I see all the comments and engagement here down below. And so ping us, tell us where you're tuning in from. Would love to hear. And just as questions come up, I think I still have my dinger. Oh, that's the different one. That's my little air horn. I was supposed to be a little question dinger. I don't know. Maybe there it is. Okay. So yes, would love for you guys to chime in. Tell us where you're tuning in from. Two ways to do that. Obviously here in the chat window within LinkedIn is a great place to start with that. So again, if this is your first time here, welcome. We are really excited that you came and joined us on this. Just to give you a little bit of the lay of the land of why we do this, what you can expect and how you can engage. Really, what you can expect is experts and leaders in this space. We are really diligent about trying to find the best folks really in here to talk about this idea and topic of reality capture and how you can engage with us. Obviously, we talked about answering questions here and really diving in. And really why we're doing this is to simplify reality capture. That's really our hope and intention of doing these different reality capture live sessions. And so I jumped ahead a little bit too quickly, but Danny here is one of our guests here. This is going to be a really fun time. He is the Director of Innovation over at PMA, and really excited to have him on to talk about this topic. And then also Raymond, who's also on the PMA team, who's just going to bring another great perspective from his team as well of really what reality capture has looked like for them. So without further ado, I want to bring these guys in and just appreciate you guys joining us. Here today, we have a Californian and a Texan, another local Texan here. And so really appreciate you guys joining in with us. Welcome into the show.
Thanks for having us. Really excited to be here.
Yeah, this is
Grant,
great.
if you hit me with that air horn, you're going to throw me off. So
I know. I hit the wrong buzzer there.
I'm waiting here to hear that sound off again. That was cool.
I have 3 buttons, and I clearly hit the wrong button there. That horn will not be used. I guarantee it.
All right.
So, no, it's great to see you guys. One, just appreciate your guys' time. I know this is busy season, finishing up the year, and really how we got in contact. This was really exciting. One of the co-founders of Struction Site, who's now on obviously the DroneDeploy team, said, hey, you guys need to talk with these guys. This is going to be a really fun conversation. And I know you guys both have some background with Struction Site, the company that DroneDeploy recently acquired. And we'll get into all that fun stuff too. But yeah, just before we do that, would love, Raymond, I'll kind of kick it to you, just a little bit about your background and really your role at PMA and really who PMA is too. I think hopefully that'll be a good kind of kickoff to the folks that are tuned in with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Grant. Just to get us started, so who's PMA? We're project management advisors. We are a national real estate project development and development consultant. So we're on the owner side. We can manage every element of the project from early due diligence, inception, all the way through to closing it out and helping our clients really make the best use of their facility, right? Give them the building that they need. Our company is roughly 200 employees. We have 7 offices nationwide, Chicago, San Francisco, San Diego, LA, Orlando, New York, and Austin. So we cover quite a breadth of the most of the major metropolitan areas that can basically serve most of our clients around the nation. Our major market sectors are commercial office, life sciences, hospitality, healthcare, multifamily residential, nonprofit, civic, cultural, education, and advanced tech. So mouthful there.
Everything.
The way I like to articulate is we really like complex projects, right? I think between Danny and myself, we've done a variety of fairly technical things. My background, I spent 8 years at DPR Construction as a project intern, became a project engineer, then worked my way up to being a senior field engineer. Within that stint, I was also part of the DPR innovation team for a solid year and a half, and that's how I was introduced to elements of reality capture, which we'll go into. I won't ruin it for you, Grant. And the last 5 or so years, I've been on the owner side, worked with a couple different consultancies. I've done projects all over the Bay Area. Having that background with the GC has given me a lot of perspective on how, not just how we deliver the project, but what sort of technology should we be bringing, what sort of questions we as the owner should be asking so that we can deliver the best possible projects for our clients. So that's a little bit about myself. Danny?
Well said.
Yeah, thanks, Raymond.
Great intro.
Yeah, like Raymond, I've been in the construction and development world for 17 years. I started my career in the Air Force, doing international and national project management. So that was an exciting time. The latter half here, I've been in the owner's rep world. So like Raymond, that third party trusted advisor to give to our clients, make sure projects are delivering correctly. And specifically at PMA, I got brought on board as the director of innovation. Which is an exciting thing for me because I've always been fascinated with technology and drones and reality capture and AI and everything that's coming online right now. And we're kind of experiencing this renaissance with innovation, which historically, construction has not been one of those industries. It's been a risk averse, and sort of that freedom to make allowable mistakes has not always been available to us. So first and foremost, my responsibility is to instill a culture of innovation within the company, which is always challenging, but I think we're making some great strides on that. Beyond that, we look at process improvement. So how do we make our project managers, the best they can be, with being equipped with the best tools and equipment that's out there, sort of looking internally at our own processes and how we can implement agile business practices. And lastly, which relates to this, is the market research and analysis. So what's coming online in the industry and how can we deploy it on our projects?
No tall task. All of those things sound incredibly intimidating, but the way you explain it sounds exciting, which it is. And it is. I love the term you use, like renaissance, because it truly is an interesting season, or I guess you could call it just timeline that we've been in construction alone. I've been in the industry for about 10 years, and it's crazy to think what 10. Anyway, this isn't about me. This is about you guys. I want to dive into it. I have so many questions for y'all.
Yeah, someone mentioned, this was like 5 or 6 years ago, that the latest innovation in construction was the nail gun. And you can't say that anymore. It's just changing so quickly.
Man,
I don't know if that's wrong. It could be true.
That is a good thing. Let's put the nail gun behind us. Great tool, but we will sunset that as the greatest innovation of our time. So the first question I want to get into, and you kind of hit to it, Raymond, so maybe I'm going to start with you, Danny, a little bit, is like, what was your first experience with this idea of reality capture? Raymond, you kind of hit to just you coming from kind of the general contractor side and having used it. But Danny, I'm curious, what was your first experience diving into some of this?
Yeah, well, my first exposure to drones was in the military. And this was some 15 years ago in deployed environments where they sit in these operations center and have drones all over the country. You can just see live what's happening in the battlefield. And I always thought that's just fascinating that these geographically separated areas could be seen centralized from these operations center. So when it came to reality capture, I actually started a drone business and operated it for a good 3 years. I spent a lot of my time articulating the value, and a lot of times it's the general contractors of why we should be using drones. And I wouldn't say it fell on deaf ears, but there's a lot of conversations of, well, convince the owner and we'll throw it in our general conditions. Now on the other side, or I guess back to the owner's side, I get the opportunity like this to be an apostle of it and really spread the gospel to make sure it gets on projects appropriately.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've heard folks use this. It doesn't feel like a stretch, but it's like, hey, construction is a battlefield, right? And to be able to see all these different
Definitely.
sites and all these different projects that are going on from a centralized location, I don't feel like that analogy gets used enough. Is just how are you assessing your battlefield? And I've heard people maybe go a little too far of like, hey, the mapping that you can do from aerial reality capture like is your daily battle plan, right? Like that helps you disseminate troops and move people throughout the job and where you need to go. But no, it's super interesting to hear. Raymond, what kind of maybe elaborate a little bit more on kind of your first experience, maybe more on the owner side, kind of coming from the general contractor side of, hey, reality capture from an owner's perspective.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk briefly just kind of how I got my start. I guess my familiarity. I mean, everyone's got an iPhone, right? So we all started. We're project engineers. You know what it was like to go out there, take a photo of a situation, try to communicate and articulate an issue to superintendent and someone who's not immediately there right now that you need to work out a resolution with, right? Kind of fast forward a little bit. Really, we're calling it reality capture. My style was just kind of goof around the job site with these time-lapse cameras. I don't know if you guys ever played with the Brino time-lapse cameras. I had them set up on site just because I thought doing time-lapse on construction was freaking cool. and then I got this little 360 widget at one point that spun around on an axis, and I timed it to take these photos periodically. So I had
Nice.
these 360
Oh,
pano,
fancy.
revolving time-lapse. I just thought that was really cool. And then kind of when I joined the innovation, I think we had already been playing with 360 cameras. And that's when, I came along to reality, more formal, what we know today as reality capture technology. Using those 360 cameras to capture things on job sites, looking at different platforms that were available back in, gosh, was it 2016?
Don't age us too much here.
I know. Whatever they were using in 2016 pre-instruction site. And was kind of part of that wave at the beginning with DPR among a couple of other folks. We had a lot of really good support on the innovation team throughout the country, and just some really eager minds to test some of this stuff out. We partnered with a couple different firms, and we eventually became big fans of instruction site because of how easy it was to use and how well it integrated to our day-to-day processes, and really enjoyed being active participants in providing that feedback loop to help get it to where it was in a place that it eventually reached mass adoption. So that was really cool to be part of. So fast forward a little bit after that, stepping out of the GC's shoes a little bit when I came on the owner side, I started interacting more at a higher level, getting to know other GCs and architects and a bunch of other firms, and started to see that there's actually still some disparity in the integration and implementation of some of these technologies, right? So I just started bringing it up in meetings, if I was talking to a GC, and it actually was really one of the nice things that came out of being separated during COVID was that it necessitated the use of these technologies,
Totally,
right? So
right.
I started utilizing more and more so the 360 cams to do site walks, to do coordination, because at that point in time, we couldn't all be at the job site at the same time, right? I think it was during shelter in place. So that's when it really hit me. It's like, wow, this is extremely useful, especially for people who, when we're talking about teams that are in different geographical locations, they still, even though we're technically not in that COVID time, that shelter in place time anymore, super relevant to where we're at today. I know, Danny, you have some thoughts on this as well, right?
Yeah, I think we're more or less going to Teams calls the assumption, and the weekly job site visits is reducing significantly, and for good reason. If you think about that travel to job sites, either locally or nationally, that can add up very quickly. And we talk about ROIs and what the cost and impact of a tool like this. It starts adding up very quickly when you can eliminate some of those trips. And really, I see a lot of this reality capture as a communication tool, because you think about that friction of from when an issue is noticed in the field to an RFI up to the architect, and then change orders back down and back up with a change order, and we're having to articulate this issue along the way. A lot of times owners don't understand our language, which is drawings and specifications. And some, pictures worth 1,000 words. And if you can, within seconds, go to that condition and see what's going on, it's a tremendous time saving.
I do have a button here. It feels worthy here. I don't know if it's going to play.
Not the air horn. Okay.
But it's true. I mean, this is my little applause button. But I think that's really true too. And you actually answered the question I was going to ask. Is just like a little bit hitting on the value. But I'm going to kind of like skip ahead to another question. I don't even think I put this in a slide question. Is like, why do you think more owners aren't seeing the value of reality capture? Is it an education thing? Is it an awareness thing? Is it a general contractor? Like what are the roots of more owners maybe not seeing the value of this? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll take a stab. So, when it comes to like drones, like we know if we're talking ROI, right, which is the first thing people ask, like we generally understand the denominator of how much a drone service costs, but the numerator is often difficult to describe if it's not discrete. And us as owners reps fall in the same category. We know what architects do and we know what engineers do and general contractors. So why do we buy this additional service? And we've done it, really tried to articulate that in terms of risk. And if we're buying down that risk by having an expert on the team, then we can all benefit from that. And I find drones and this reality capture fall in the same camp. It's just an opportunity to shore in your risk with these conditions that oftentimes create so much friction and deliver better on projects.
The term you used of buying down the risk, that feels like an owner's term, but it is true. I mean, when you think about it,
you have to use that, Danny.
I like that. We're gonna hashtag that. No, but it is interesting when you think about it. Like, you guys you really are at the peak of the risk, right? Well, I shouldn't say peak. Their peak is distributed across the entire project, right? From subcontractors to contractors to obviously the owner's perspective. But when you think about assessing that risk and associating reality capture to buying that down, right? You are buying and investing into platforms that help you really mitigate that risk. I think and we'll get to some crawl, walk, run stuff here in a little bit, but when you think about the early stages of folks buying into this, it's like, oh, it's just replacing a job site visit. It's like, yes, that's a great entry point. If that's something that you're wanting to, assess and do less of, then great. Like, invest in reality capture because of that. But then when you start to get to like, oh, this is a risk mitigation play here that we're, buying into. Raymond, do you have any thoughts to that?
Yeah, I mean, I like that phrase, buying into risk. And when you think about, at least when I think about, what are we, when we're looking at services at early stages in construction, right, we're always trying to assess, well, what are we actually buying, right? Because we're involved really early on. We have to help make some strategic decisions before a lot of things are baked. And what happens with reality capture, what is nice about reality capture, and the way I like to articulate is, you're basically buying more information from your job site, right? You're buying some certainty when you're reviewing something, when you're looking at something in a snapshot of time. It becomes a known quantity, not just someone talked about it in a room and you're not quite sure whether something happened or not. I've lost count of how many times I'm reviewing invoices and billing, and I'm like, I think you're overbilling a little bit, but the information I have is what's in front of me, right? Mm-hmm. And what happens is, I go out, I take a job walk, I walk with GC sub, and we have a discussion around it, right? That timeline can, depending on where I'm at and where everyone else is, can be quite substantial, right? And to have information ahead of that, when that's being submitted, that I have access to, just helps. It makes everyone's lives a lot easier, right? Both from our end in terms of expediting and providing those known quantities to someone on the other end being paid on time, right? Because there's just fewer questions now. That information is there. So that's how I like to think about it. Quantify, if you're trying to, and you can quantify all the hours of the folks who are involved in that process, right?
Yeah. What's funny, I'm chuckling because I remember this term, and I'm sure you guys can resonate with this too. I feel like it's a little bit of a legacy term now of like, oh, central source of truth. Everyone loves central source of truth. And it was kind of applied to like project documents, right? Everyone talked about electronic project documents, and that was the central source of truth. But no one really ever considered how documentation and reality capture being that central source of truth. Like, when you think about project documents, right? It's like how you build the building, and like that's what everyone is referencing. But then what about all the other intangible things, the pay applications, the dispute resolution, the collaboration on issues? Like, that as a central source of truth is really fascinating, that I think almost got like covered by that umbrella being just like documentation in general and not necessarily like being from a like reality capture perspective. Danny, any thoughts I'm sure you've heard that term before, right?
Oh yeah, no, I use single source of truth on a daily basis.
Yeah.
But no, I think it's true. And when it comes to reality capture and things like drones, I think part of these misconceptions and barriers of success is drones are seen as sort of a tool. And I remember when I was as a toy. I remember when I was operating this drone business, it's like, hey, here's all these wonderful things we can do with maps and orthomosaics and photogrammetry. And first the question was like, oh, can you record my son's snowboarding video kind of thing?
Yeah, right.
And or marketing content with videos and pictures and such, which is great, but I think because there's that conception, like it's seen as an intern activity. Like, oh yeah, take the intern out there, go fly the drone and get some pictures. But the truth is there's very practical commercial applications to this technology. And I think when we get that expertise in how to analyze drone imagery rather than on site and really do a comprehensive evaluation of what can be visually expected rather than going on site and saving some of those trips, we can really reduce that time that Raymond was talking about before.
Yeah, well said. Raymond, any thoughts you want to add to that?
I mean, I think that, to take that one step for, we're talking kind of nuts and bolts construction and usefulness. I think to take it even further, it's like, we're talking about having access to something that's, where when it stops becoming the tool that's used at the job site, how else can we further use this information, right? And I always think as-built. Can we look behind a wall, right? Can we look underground, right? Because we're doing drone scans for all the stubs and before we're pouring concrete, right? There's just such a great opportunity there to just further leverage all this information that's just made available to you now, beyond just looking at it as, oh, it's a widget, it's a tool, the contractor's doing it, right?
Yeah. I think what's interesting too, what I've probably been the most encouraged about in this space, probably in the last 2 or 3 years, is how like reality capture hasn't been in these like buckets anymore. Like there used to be like scanning was its own reality capture, 360 cameras were like drone. Like this idea of unifying reality capture, I think is like super exciting because it's like you start to really bring all of these different kind of, call it methods, I guess, if you want to call it that, like now together. It's almost like they amplify each other in combining. It's not like you were talking about, Raymond, about just like doing as-builts, right? It's like, well, if you only have aerial as-builts, you're probably missing out on some of the other ground truth information, right? Like you probably need to supplement that with some information on the ground that could be helpful in that. Or, you talk about renovations, like you're probably going to get a lot of value out of doing interior reality capture. It's just interesting how that kind of like paradigm shift of like, hey, point solution reality capture is just going to be really challenging to overcome in the sense that like, hey, they all should be in the same platform. Like they should all be converging to leverage the value of them together rather than independently and having to sift through like, okay, I got to go to this platform for this and this platform.
We don't need any more fragments in this industry, right?
Yeah, well said. It is just interesting to think about that too. I want to get to, I love personally this like kind of section, I guess if we call it this, of the show. To call this a show feels a little weird, but we talk about crawl, walking, and run often, right? So it's like, hey, the reason we do this is to really help simplify this idea of reality capture, and people come in and tune in to this at really all different phases of their journey, right? I'm curious to kind of hear your guys' perspective on how you would encourage other owners that are listening in, or the contractors that are listening in too, that have heard this term floated around, reality capture. That's great. Maybe losing projects or losing jobs to this idea because maybe someone else is performing this better. Like, how would you encourage people to crawl just in this idea of reality capture?
Yeah, I think the first and foremost is awareness. There's a lot, and that's really what I spend most of my time doing as an innovation director is managing the change and understanding that these tools are out there and how can it be applicable, and will that effort of learning the new thing better my time and make me more effective at what I do. So yeah, I think the discovery and awareness, attending these kinds of podcasts, doing your own research, seeing it coming online on projects, and we should be doing that too, and spreading the gospel is certainly the first step to understand where the value is. And I think once we get to that stage, then we can talk about the applications and how it can better myself. But that first step oftentimes is the hardest one.
Right.
Yeah,
And I think sometimes it's, you don't know what you don't know, right? So I think to Dan's point, come into talks like this where it's pretty, you keep it pretty high level, but we want to make sure that there's some practicality so people know what the specific applications are. And also knowing who your partners are, right? Leverage, it's amazing how we talk about innovation in this industry and how sometimes it can be slow, but having had the privilege of working for DPR for like a long time, a top contractor, how it was amazing to see how much technology they were leveraging and also trying to push the boundaries of, right? And then understanding that the folks that are around us, the architects, the engineers, the GCs, are actually resources in helping us understand and learn a little bit more about how these things become useful is key in really developing that discovery, right? Is not just knowing what it is, but knowing who else knows what this stuff is and how can they articulate it in a way that brings value, where it allows me to see the value, so then I can therefore take the next step and talk about, okay, now that I see the value in this technology, how does it apply? Then you start talking about really technical things, like pay apps, coordination, insurance, legal, all that fun stuff that comes with having the access of information after you understand how to implement it.
yeah. I think what's kind of fascinating about this idea too is like, hey, there's plenty of runway here.
Oh yeah.
And I think when we talk about the discovery phase, it's it's something that, hey, you can camp in any one of these phases, optimize any one of them too. But really, hopefully, the folks that are tuning in and becoming more aware, or just trying to better understand what is this term, what does it mean, like, man, this ain't going anywhere. Like, if anything, hopefully you should take a little retro back and say like, wow, look how far it's come, which I think is really exciting too. Danny, I'm sure you have kind of some parts to add to that too, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, you think about agility too as an enterprise. There's just the trying, and again, freedom to make allowable mistakes. That let's try this drone thing out. It really, in the scheme of a construction project, it is a drop of a bucket. So just the opportunity to try it out, and even just an awareness of its existence is beneficial. And those groups that get familiar with being agile and retooling or incorporating some of these additional processes are going to yield a benefit when we come out of this contraction that we're going to be experiencing in 24, and really setting themselves up for success because they understand what's out there and how to apply it to their business.
Yeah, well said. I want to get to a question here. We kind of joked about this at the beginning because I think it's just an interesting question to ask that I don't know that we've asked it on other episodes, but the question is really, hey, if you could do it all over again, like let's go back 5 years, right? Like what do you wish you would have told yourself about reality capture 5 years ago, right? Whether you were coming into the owner space or other folks that are, starting out their careers being owners reps and working as kind of the managerial side of construction management, like what would you guys do? Would it be more education? Would it be more like, hey, diving in, experimenting? Would it be more like testing it and seeing, like, give me a little bit of like your perspective on do it all over again. What would you do different?
Yeah. I 5 years ago, I was getting my start in the owner's world, and I think my observation at the time was, I came in having this perspective, right, because of my time doing innovation and having done reality capture, and I was seeing some of this be applied within projects that we were doing at the time. Uh, if I were to go back and tell myself what I could have done to contribute a little bit more, is to just have more discussion around it. More focus, and really, because this is was it 5-6 years ago, we're just kind of starting. Drones were already big, and then this 360 photos were getting bigger, but making it known to the folks around me that, hey, this is actually readily available, and it's worth having a chat with your GCs, with your architects, and actually demonstrating to them, right, and actually doing demonstrations. I did a couple, but if I think back, in terms of trying to make position, people in the owner space a little more aware. I think that's something that I probably would have put a little more effort, knowing what I know today and then kind of where things are today. That's not to say I don't think it's in a bad place. I just think that there's always room to grow and to bring more awareness, especially in this field of owners where sometimes technology seems a little elusive to us, and we want to change that perception.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like kind of what we're trying to do here, right? It's just like, hey, it's a pretty broad and ambiguous topic. Like, let's just really hone in on simplifying. Like, what are its uses? What are its values? Like, what are the stories behind it? Danny, what would you kind of say?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I'm glad he gave me some goalposts here because that would be an existential
5 years.
question if you let me.
We can go all the way back, but yeah, I mean,
How far do you want to go back? I think my response is patience. I'm very much an early adopter when it comes to technology and innovation. And 5 years ago, I was building out the single source of truth, slickest, set of tools on the latest software and incorporating all these fun things. And now it's kind of stepping into more of a corporate role where it's teaching and mentoring, getting people on board with these ideas, and that majority to catch up with the early adopters takes time and patience. I mean, I could sit all day and kind of wag my finger and let them know, hey, you need to catch up with these tools that are coming online, or X, Y, and Z are going to happen. But, just that patience and getting that consensus as we cross the finish line is far more important than just my expertise per se. So that would be my 2 cents.
Yeah, it's funny. We don't talk about that enough, of just like time, right? Like, sure. That's hard to do because we're in this role that we maybe sit in a very slow industry, but yet some of these technologies change so quickly. So like, how do you balance the ebb and flow of that? It's like, oh, I want to try all these new things and this is exciting, but yet I know when I go back to my desk on Monday, like, hey, it's really hard, right? Like, it's really hard to turn that wheel. But yeah, I love what you said there too, because it really is the perspective that I think keeps you in it, keeps you excited, keeps you engaged. And if your perception or just your perspective is just like one of impatience of like, well, come on here, right? Like, move on to the next thing. It's like, you don't invest to get to see the fruit of the impact that it could have. And that's a great point to make.
It's funny because sympathize with the superintendent, right? Like, so now I've done this a million years, and now we've got all these drones, and I've got these tablets and these softwares to tell me how to do my job. And that space between the walls, which used to be my domain, is now being dominated by all these other things coming online. And so again, patience with them and articulating the value and training on it.
Yeah.
It's funny because I think we mentioned working. I'm making an observation. We're kind of on the opposite. I wish I probably should have been a little more aggressive in my approach, right? And a little less patient. I was probably a little too patient. Whereas I think on your end, like, you're pushing the boundaries, but then realize that there's a bunch of people who are back there. I gotta. They need to come with me in order for this to actually be effective at larger scale, right?
Yeah, and one thing I don't think we could talk about, this could be a whole episode in itself, is just the people side of reality capture, right? Like, it is this really unique convergence of people and technology that obviously, like, people are the ones behind, capturing it and analyzing it and educating on it, but yet it is growing at such a fast pace. So to like be tied to an expert or to have resources to help like keep you up to speed on it, it's just really tricky, right? And that once you find those things and have those resources, like, those become, very helpful resources to continue to educate yourself from and tap into. I do want to get to one. Where's my little ding? There it is. Okay, we have actually a question. This is great. So Bran in the comments said, hey, love the comments, Raymond and Danny. Have you guys discovered a common thread or reoccurring conversation with a general contractor that ultimately tips the scale to employ reality capture for a project or not? One, thanks for the question adding in here. Any thoughts to that? Like, summarizing that, maybe like, what is the tipping point? Like, when do you guys kind of see that from your perspective?
I'll take a shot. I think so. Tipping point. I think it's a maturity of the general contractor a lot of times that's driving that. A lot of times they won't suggest it unless they have some familiarity with it. And then once they get to that point, it's probably going to be part of their standard service. We were talking about this before the call started, but incorporating to the specifications or even the RFP when it goes out to that of how are you doing reality capture and get the response. And then you can start using that as a disqualifier for the groups that are more mature with it or not. So I don't know if that's necessarily a tipping point, but I think at some point it's certainly going to be part of the conversation.
Yeah, well said, Raymond. Yeah. Any thoughts you'd add?
Yeah, I think in addition to that, I think early on, when we're writing out RFPs, right? We actually have to have a pretty good understanding of scale and scope and applicability. And for us, being able to articulate that in a way where a contractor can come on board and say, okay, they're doing the job at this scale. Here's some frameworks around it, right? And we, as much as we want to say declare, hey, you need to use this technology, we generally like to hear what the suggestions are, because there might be some better suggestions than what we were even thinking about, right? And to see, whether how a GC would qualify using a technology for a particular scale. That's also in addition to when we're talking to GCs, when we're qualifying, gathering their technological sophistication, types of projects they've done, types of partnerships that they've formed, right? And then, I don't know if that answers the question directly, but that's actually a really good one.
Yeah, and I like what you said too. Oh, go for it, Danny.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was going to just respond that, like, respond to your question with the challenge, and think about what are the most critical times on a job site that a drone map or image would benefit you and your client. And so most large projects, sure, we're going to do a weekly scan using drones and maybe some of the reality capture stuff. But if you were to limit to, say, 10 events, that would be beneficial to your project, to me, that would be the tipping point. That'd be to buy off on a lighter scope.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually,
go for it.
The question I've asked Danny is, how will you leverage technology to ensure we can actually have some accountability on the job site? That's a pretty broad question, but a lot of what we talked about today actually are the tools that help facilitate, those processes, right? To drive accountability on the jobs, because at the end of the day, we're all, even us, we're all we like to see ourselves that we're fiduciaries of our clients, right? We're there to protect their money, to get them the building that they actually need, and we want to integrate the most innovative tools and controls that can actually allow for that. And reality capture is a part of that equation.
Yeah, super hard right turn here, but you made me think about something that I was like, I'm very curious. Like when you talk about representing the clients, right? Like to think about their, call it only interaction with reality capture, probably like fixed cameras, right? It's like, oh, cool. I can go to click on a link and it shows me anytime, just like what maybe I have at home for my home security system, right? But now they're able to virtually walk their site anytime, right? And they can do that from anywhere in any board meeting that they have and share that with, potential tenants and buyers of that space. Like, talk about what you guys have heard from maybe a client's perspective now. Like, hey, that's almost becoming the standard of, what they would come to expect in these projects that they're building. I mean, they buy homes and get virtual tours of homes, right? Like they're seeing reality capture impact these other industries. And now on these projects that they're building, like to maybe enlighten us a little bit from what you hear on that perspective of like, hey, fixed cameras were the standard. And now it's like completely, aerial progress, reports and ground virtual walks. Like, how do you feel like that's almost been a paradigm shift of what those building owners expect?
I think we're getting there. I don't think we're 100% of the way there, but I think a lot of developers have actually, the more technical and sophisticated developers have actually come onto that because they do see the value, right? Especially when you're working with a spec developer that's trying to lease property. You're not only giving them access to a job site where they can actually broadcast and bring potential clients through before, but you're also instilling some control so that you're not bringing prospective people to a place that could potentially be unsafe, right? Because there's construction going on, there might be installing, but you're giving them sort of like a sneak peek into those environments so they actually have access to it, facilitate their business decisions at a more substantial scale than just, what we're doing with on the project.
Yeah, and I think I'd just add, like, it depends on the maturity of the developer or owner. I think for most owners, it's sort of a low frequency, high consideration activity, meaning like most people are building a building when they are running out of space effectively, but they have to spend a tremendous amount of energy to review it. But your question specifically, I think for a while they were talking about augmented reality and virtual reality, and I don't think that's come to the promise that it had at one point. And now those renderings are incredible. I mean, like, it feels like you're in the space, even if it's entirely virtual. But yeah, I really do love the existing conditions and the scans being included in those marketing content.
Yeah, I want to get to this part too, because we're going to wrap up here in a second. One, again, thank you guys for the questions here on the chat as well. But one of my favorite parts, as we kind of land the plane here, is just some hot takes. One hot take question is like, hey, what are other owners missing out on by not adopting this? You've kind of hit on it in a couple different ways, but like, let's get specific. Like, what are they missing out on in not adopting reality capture?
I think we hit on a lot of it earlier, but just kind of showing the progress over time. I mean, when I'm running an owner meeting and we're talking about what's going on in the job site, I start with drone imagery or some sort of imagery to articulate the progress that's happening on the job site. I also think that like there's this kind of QA/QC adherence to plans, but also like if you think about like an owner from a facility perspective, that like it's an existing building and understanding either the condition assessment, if it's a new property you're investing in, or doing some due diligence, or even thermography if you want to throw in doing thermal imagery with drones and reality capture. I just think there's a lot of opportunity that perhaps is being missed, not being used.
Yeah, I think that's a loaded question. There's a lot we can go into on that.
It's an episode in itself for sure. But
I think one of the most important things is, for us, right, we're always trying to bring awareness into to the job site because we're in a position where we're providing strategic guidance to help facilitate decision making, and a lot of times those decisions will come and go on a project at any given time, right? So awareness of the project environment and having access visually to information in real time helps to actually streamline and shorten those timelines. Because if we're out being asked to make a substantial change to the job site, and our owner or our client wasn't aware that something was probably poured in place or in concrete, and we can't get into the slab anymore. Sometimes you actually spend a lot of time talking about it before anyone's even actually really aware. It's like you said, you can email, you can have meetings all day about these things, but photos worth 1,000 words, right? it'll tell you everything you need to do. And for us, it's being able to allow to give them the access to that information, right? To let them know that, hey, for your awareness, this is what's going on. It's there. It's visual. It just adds so much to the conversation that just isn't there if you don't have just some visual representation, especially for folks who aren't able to come to the job site on a weekly or even monthly basis, right? Some folks don't have the time to be there.
Yeah, I think that was a word that definitely rose to my mind too when you were saying that. It's just awareness and visibility, like just the thinking of working on a project and not having that is just like, man, to think that the only way that you would get that is truly by like putting your boots on and like going and visiting a job. That's definitely missing out on that quite a bit. Well, Raymond and Danny, one, I just really appreciate you guys. We could go on for a long time. I want to respect your time and obviously make sure that we end things here on time. But one, just appreciate you guys. This is fun. They're just, I love how I think kind of to full circle this a little bit is like, hey, the awareness is such a huge thing, right? Like hearing you say kind of going back and wishing opportunities to do that more and share with others and what that kind of looks like is really important. And that's obviously our intention in doing these two things as well. So I'm going to let you guys sign off. One, thank you again for hopping in with us. I got a couple quick things I'm going to do from an announcement standpoint, but really appreciate your guys' time. Thank you for joining us in the busier season of the year with holidays and schedules and all that fun stuff. So Raymond, Danny, thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Grant. Let's do this again.
We got plenty more hot takes. I think
we have a lot of time. We can keep going on for days on this.
Oh, I love it. Well, guys, thank you again. Really appreciate it. I do want to kind of quick say just some things to note on here. Really to give you guys some next steps. So we just had our user conference here a few months back on, hey, like I want to dive into these topics more. What does this look like? Where else can I kind of learn some resources about what Danny and Raymond were both talking about? And we put out really the hub. This is everything that we talked about at our user conference, which was great to kind of give you a reason of why reality capture is so important, how folks are using it, and just wanted to shed some light on here. If you haven't seen, this is probably the single most impactful content that we put out there this year, and we just encourage you to go reference it. We'll put a link to it here in the description as well for you guys to have access to. But With that said, thank you for tuning in. These are just great conversations, really fun. We have one more episode of these that we're probably going to do before the end of the year. I don't want to tease. We'll tease about it once we get some more final details figured out, but it's going to be awesome. I've heard some potential topics that we're going to finish up on with some surveys that we've done and kind of some reports that we put out just about this idea of reality capture. But before we close the year, we'll do one more of these things to meet you guys then. So appreciate the time. Really encouraged. Thank you for dropping us your notes in there in the chat. We look forward to hearing more of your guys' questions here for future episodes and future conversations. So thank you for tuning in. Have a great rest of your week, and we will see you next time. Thanks.